Hey you, and welcome. My name is Mike, and in this whole video, we're gonna go back, at this stage, it's our local, Ontario, Toronto. This one is a little special though, because the number of people who have requested that I cover it is more than the number of people who live in Canada. It's Bruce time. And I guess you could also call this guy the boss. Don't think he would have many employees. And you'd find his customers in the garden. You'll see what I mean when I show you what I mean. Just give it a go. This one, hey, it's Ontario. It's our usual haunt at this stage. Been there just a few times. So this one I'm gonna skip the usual where, and let's go right back and begin at the beginning. That's when Big Bruce was Baby Bruce. BB was born on the 8th of October, 1951, in rural Ontario, the town of Lindsay. Not a lot to say about it, so I won't say a lot about it. Our bright and bouncing boy, even as a joke I don't like saying that about him, he grew up near Woodville, another small community north of Toronto. Now the thing we will say about Bruce is that he was different. Obviously we will get to that. But what I mean by that is like growing up in a small town, 50s, 60s, everybody knows each other, you don't really want to stand out. His parents, Malcolm and Isley, were very religious, though two separate faiths, which caused friction as there's no budging on either side. They would also have foster children, so Bruce had one biological sister and a lot of siblings. So Bruce, he figured out at a young age, when he was a young fella, that girls, not for him. Not for him. He was interested in the lads, and in a small community back in the 60s, oof, they won't like that one. So he did what a lot of people did back then, probably still do. He faked it till he made it. In high school, he started dating Janice Campbell. The only person he was trying to convince at this stage that he was straight was himself. I like dudes, boo! Bruce and Janice got married after a few years, and then they moved to Oshawa and had two kids, a boy and a girl. For work, it was retail, eventually a traveling salesman wandering around Toronto. In Oshawa, he was a big part of the local church, and eventually in the early 90s, he came out of the closet to his wife Janice, who I'm sure was just blown away. They decided to stay together, for the kids, for the family, and then not sure if Janice was part of the discussion when Bruce decided they'd have an open marriage. You know what I mean? He's having a great time. Later, Bruce and Janice, they got in some financial shite. Bruce lost his job. Money was tight, even tighter when their son got in some legal trouble. Apparently, their son, Todd, he would ring up women, just make indecent comments. He's basically having a wank while he was on the phone to them. So that was more money out the window. And so they didn't just say bankruptcy, they declared it. Then Bruce, he decided to use this, as an excuse for a clean break, a fresh start. He divorced the missus at an age 46. Hey, never too late to start again, unfortunately for some parts of this story. And he moved to Toronto. He was, at this point, living his best life. He was happy and jolly, live, laugh, love, all that stuff. He became a regular in gay neighborhoods, really got into it, and wanted to be a part of the LGBTQ+ community. Fair play to him, good for him. Unfortunately, Bruce, he got a little bit too into it. He got into a relationship with a guy. That ended, he went to therapy and was prescribed antidepressants. And he started up a landscaping company called Artistic Design. And so to date, things weren't easy for Big Bruce. He had his hardships. He couldn't be who he really was for most of his life, and then finally, as he neared 50, it was like he really became alive in a way. He then decided to, do the opposite of that. Yeah, to others. And Bruce remained a part of the community in the Church and Wellesley area, the village, the main LGBTQ+ neighborhood in Toronto. And though he remained part of the community didn't feel the same way. He was known as Trouble. Maybe skip this one. But when it came to having a few beers, he was grand, one of the lads, regular. Just maybe avoid contacting the Silver Fox. He was still working as a landscaper, artistic designs was up and running, and he was good. He was liked by his clients. He knew how to set up beautiful flower beds, planting seeds, exotic flora, and all that. He seemed to have great food for growing his plants. He was busy, Big Bruce always driving around town in his truck, always on the go. He would hire people from time to time. They never really stuck around for too long though. And years would go by. All good. Well, that's what people wanted to think. Especially the police. In reality, a lot of men were going missing from the Church and Wellesley area. A lot of them ending up in Bruce's flower beds. Skandaraj Navartnam was the first. Skanda, as he was known to his friends, was a refugee from Sri Lanka, coming to Canada in the early 90s. He studied at the University of Toronto and later worked at Ryerson University. During the summer of 2010, Skanda got a puppy. He was mad about it, always sharing pictures and always with it. So it was weird when in September 2010 he left the dog behind and disappeared. Skandaraj was reported missing on the 16th of September 2010. He was last seen in the early hours of the 6th of September, leaving a nightclub called Zippers with 2 men. When he was reported missing, the police were told of his alcohol and drugs usage. His family thought he might have gone into hiding due to his immigration status, but there were no signs of anything wrong. Foul play, I mean. He just disappeared, leaving everything behind. His laptop was taken by the police, and although they could have done an analysis, they didn't for another 2 years. The investigation quickly came to a standstill. The police moved on. His friends and family didn't. It was the same when Abdul Basar Faizi disappeared. Abdul Basar was from Afghanistan, moving to Canada in 1999 in hopes of a better life. He worked as a machine operator, was married, 2 children. No one knew he was gay, and this secret caused him a lot of stress. He was last seen at 11 PM on the 29th of December 2010 at Steamworks Bath, a gay sauna. And after that, he disappeared. His wife called, his cousin called, nothing. He was reported missing the next day. No one knew where he had been for a while. He had told his wife he was going to meet a friend. His car was found on the 4th of January in an area, Moore Avenue, about 10 minutes from the sauna. His family, who, didn't know he was gay, would say, he had no reason to be in that part of town. Did he, though? Now, these 2 cases were both handled by different police departments. One investigator, though, said that, she thought they could be connected, but nothing would really come of it, and it'd come to a standstill. On the 25th of October 2012, Majid Kayhan was reported missing. He, again from Afghanistan, married, 2 kids, secretly gay. Even after he divorced and moved into the gay part of town, he still had difficulty coming out. He had been seen by his son on the 14th of October, and then no word from him. When the police went to his house, no sign of foul play, but his birds were dead, and Majid would always ask a friend to look after them if he had to go out of town. The investigation into him then began, with the lead investigator having no clue about the other 2 missing people cases. It was messed up from Jump Street. It took them a while to start connecting these missing persons. But then, Project Houston began. This was a task force set up to solve these missing persons cases. It wasn't set up, though, because links had been made between the 3 people, and this would be a project then to look into. It wasn't set up because they found any links. It was set up for a completely other insane story that I'll barely scratch the surface of. See, the Toronto police received a tip from the Swiss police, the Swiss authorities. Swiss! I know, right? What? The tip said. There was a global organization of cannibals, based in Toronto. Yeah, I know, it sounds like bananas shit, but here we go. The tip said one of its members, a James Brunton, murdered Skandaraj, chopped him up, and chowed down. At this point then, the police went to Skandaraj's family and asked, hey, by any chance, is he still missing? No one solved that yet? Bummer. To cut a long story short anyway, this James guy, he wasn't connected to any of the disappearances in the village, but the police did realise the 3 disappearances were connected. James, by the way, was a giant piece of shit. He wasn't related to the disappearances at all. But he was a pedo, a molester, and he met a 15-year-old boy on a cannibalism sex website, then made the boy sign a contract saying he would be a sex slave, tortured, and then eaten.
James Alex Brunton, volunteer hockey coach, sadomasochistic child pornographer.
I really have nothing to say. I'm very sorry for what happened for my wife and family and everybody involved, but...
Do you see anything disturbing about the chats you were having online?
Yeah, but I knew they were only fantasy, and he knew they were only fantasy.
So, there you have it. Moving on. So that's when the police realised something was afoot. And then, in January 2013, they came across the email address SilverFox51. Bruce wouldn't be connected to that for a while. But the police started thinking about, what could be going on? Who knows? Serial killer? Nah, they shot that idea down pretty quick. You must be joking. Come on. They continued to investigate what they just assumed were missing persons cases, albeit slowly. Bruce was actually interviewed in November 2013, and he was connected to 2 of the missing men, but they didn't look at him too hard. They didn't realise he had almost killed someone back in 2001, and they didn't know he had been in a sexual relationship with Skandaraj for a time, so he knew him well. And then, in April 2014, Project Houston was dismissed. What happened to those missing fellas? God only knows. 2 months later, Bruce had his record suspended, so no one would know he'd ever been arrested at all. In August 2015, 49-year-old Sarush Mahmoudi disappeared. He was from Iran, once again married, had a stepson, and one day he left for work and never returned. The one thing noticed was that when he left for work, he took his travel bag with him, as if he knew he would be gone for a few days. He'd be gone a lot longer. He wasn't seen in the village though, so his disappearance wouldn't be connected to the others for a long time. Bruce, in the meantime, he just couldn't stay under the radar. Not for him. In June 2016, he ended up in a police station after a guy reported on him for almost choking him to death while they were banging in the back of his van.
Okay, he's going south now. We're inside the guy's van. There's Bruce. For a while, we trying to make out once in a while. All of a sudden, he grabbed me by the throat, threw me on behind my back. Grabbed me by the throat and tried to strangle me.
This guy managed to escape and he ran to the police. Bruce then, like before, he turned himself in.
Okay, sir, and your name is?
Bruce McArthur.
And if you could spell it for me, please.
B-R-U-C-E, and McArthur, M-C-A-R-T-H-U-R.
Okay, sir. And right now, you're under arrest. You were placed under arrest this evening for the offense of assault, okay? You've been brought here 232 Division for the purposes of being investigated for that offense, okay? So an allegation has been made against you, and this officer in just a moment is going to let you know exactly what that allegation is, okay? What I'm going to do to you right now is just read you a caution and let you know that you're being investigated for the offense of assault, okay? You're not obliged to say anything unless you wish to do so, but whatever you say may be given in evidence. Do you understand?
I do.
Okay. Do you wish to say anything in answer to the charge? Again, do you wish to provide us a statement with some clarity as to what happened? Okay.
So the allegations are that around 6:30 p.m. this evening, during the course of your involvement with him, there was an allegation made of assault, which choking was the allegation made, and that's basically why you're under arrest today for that assault.
Okay. So, sir, if you would like to provide us with your account of what occurred earlier this evening.
We were going to have sex, and he suggested doing it in the back of his truck since it hadn't been used yet. It was a brand new truck. I said, well, there's more room in the back of my van. So we went to my van. So then I thought, okay, he likes it rough. So I put my hand to his throat, and just for a few seconds, because before that he's very strong, he just completely turned around and grabbed me by the throat. He said, now I'm going to show you what I'm going to do to you. And he had me by the throat to the point that I couldn't breathe. So I put my hands up in the air like surrender, because I couldn't talk. And that's when he finally let go. And then he jumped out of the car. He said, I don't want to see you again.
Has anything like this ever happened before, where things got out of hand?
Not like that. No, not that quickly, or not just like that.
Okay. Things have never gotten violent?
No.
Okay.
I thought he liked it rough.
Okay.
He was getting off on that.
Just before we conclude, is there anything else you feel might be important to tell us before we end the interview?
Like what? I don't know what else it would be.
We always give people an opportunity to say something that maybe we haven't asked before we conclude.
I don't know. We had sex, numerous times and never had a problem.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay. Right. Time that I have.
So what the guy said to the police was they had hooked up in the back of his van, and Bruce then started just getting very violent and started choking him out. This guy barely managed to escape and ran off. Then Bruce would say, "No, yeah, we were hooking up or whatever. He asked me to choke him. He consented. He was good with it. He freaked out for some reason. That's it." The police believed Bruce, that this guy was asking for it, and they let it go. In April 2017, Selim Isen was reported missing by his ex-husband. He was from Turkey, and when he moved to Canada, he found it adjusting difficult, divorced his husband, and turned to substance abuse. However, things were on the up just before he disappeared. Then he did disappear, in the village, once again. Again, this was not linked to Project Houston and the other cases. Then, in June 2017, Andrew Kinsman was reported missing. He was last seen on the 28th of June 2017. He was a big part of the gay community, big part of the HIV/AIDS networks and foundations. He was a kind person, just wanted to help those around him and his community altogether.
Police also provided an update on the missing cases of 2 other men in the Church and Wellesley area. That has prompted this review. Police said today the cases of 2 missing men, Andrew Kinsman, who was last seen on June 26th, and Selim Isen, aren't linked to each other or to the disappearance of 3 other men who went missing from the same area years ago. Police also say the evidence does not point to a serial killer.
The police searched his apartment. His beloved cat, was found without food, water, red flag, and the biggest one was this. On a calendar found in Andrew's apartment, on the 26th of June, the last day, he was seen, written on that day was Bruce at 3 p.m.
In 2013, police announced their fears that the disappearances of those 3 men were suspicious and connected. They created a task force and dubbed it Project Houston, but the men have never been found. The obvious question with the disappearance now of another middle-aged man from the village, could Andrew Kinsman's case be connected?
Police immediately looked for CCTV footage, and they saw Andrew getting into a red Dodge Caravan at 3 p.m, but they couldn't get a plate. But that wouldn't matter, because that particular model was different from the rest. It was a 2004 20th anniversary edition of that particular model. Searching who owned that model revealed one name: Bruce. And that's when shit started getting real. A connection was made between Andrew's disappearance and Selim's disappearance. This launched Project Prism then, which would take on all the Project Houston disappearances too. A lot of projects here, very few results. Reminds me of college.
The last time 51 Division set up a task force was for this, Project Houston, the disappearance of these 3 men from the village between 2010 and 2012. All 3 disappearances deemed suspicious and connected. All these years later, there is still no trace of them. Police have not been able to rule in or rule out any connection between those cold cases and these 2 most recent disappearances.
So now they have linked 5 missing people together. You got the 3 original Project Houston people, and now Andrew and Selim. So that's those 5. Not Sarouche, by the way. He wouldn't be linked to all of this until much later. He also didn't go missing in the village, so they didn't really have a reason to link him. Bruce McArthur became a major person of interest when the investigators learned he'd been interviewed 4 years earlier for Project Houston, and he had links to some of the missing men. They also learned of the choking incident when he wasn't charged for it, but it was starting to form a picture. Not a pretty one. Maybe the police believed the wrong guy after all. He was then put under surveillance, and he was monitored at all times as he went to and from his apartment at 95 Thorncliffe Park Drive. His DNA was also collected. They got a warrant to seize his Dodge Caravan, but unfortunately at that stage, he had long gotten rid of it. Well, he'd gotten rid of the car. Not the evidence inside the car. In October 2017, they found it and discovered 4 different men's DNA samples. One was Bruce, one was Andrew, the other 2 were unknown. They then got a warrant to search his apartment and his digital devices. They found some creepy shit, like over 100 pictures of Andrew, which is on his laptop. Pictures of lots of men, actually. A lot of the pictures, the guys didn't know they were being photographed. Sneaky photographs. Weirdo. The police started following him all around as he was doing this. Snapping away. They followed him as he would do a mall. He was a mall Santa also, which is even creepier. Other pictures they found were of men inside his bedroom. 2 of them were Andrew and Selim. They were naked with a rope around their necks. Very tight. So yeah, then the police were like, right, I think we got a serial killer. Let's get him! What timing they had. On the 18th of January 2018, the police busted down Bruce's door. They were gonna get him. They were gonna arrest him. So they went into Bruce's apartment, and they found him in his bedroom. On the bed was a guy, naked, tied up, with a plastic bag over his head. And then beside was big, fat, naked Bruce, dirty dick hanging out, with duct tape. Gonna duct tape the plastic bag over him, over his mouth. Quite a sight. Nightmare fuel. Bruce was literally about to murder someone when the police busted down his door to arrest him for murdering other people. Bruce must have been very pissed off. Blue-balled by the boys in blue. Bruce was arrested and charged with first-degree murder. He denied everything that was thrown at him. So they kept him in custody, and they wanted to check one more thing. There was a property that Bruce stored all his landscaping equipment at. They thought, there could be something there, some clues maybe. They were right. There were 5 large pots in the garden, and cadaver dogs gave each a big ol' woof woof. Parts of 7 different men were found inside those pots. And on that property they would find more. Bones, pelvises, skulls. They found too many bones, if you know what I mean. The remains found were of all the men I talked about. Skandaraj, Abdul Basir, Majid, Sarouche, Selim, and Andrew. 6 men. They found 8. The 2 others were Krishna Kanagaratnam, another refugee from Sri Lanka. He was homeless and trying to avoid deportation when he was last heard from in 2015. And then also Dean Liswick, who was homeless. When he lost his job at a bar, he struggled with drugs and became a sex worker. He disappeared in April 2016. On a USB stick in Bruce's apartment, well, on it were 9 different folders, each one a victim, though sometimes he didn't know the victims' names, and inside were pictures of each victim. That was the 8 murders, and then his, well, he hoped would be his 9th when the police interrupted by arresting him. He kept a journal and loved to document his killings. At other places Bruce worked, landscaped, they would find some hair and other remains. It's a good way to hide victims, I guess, when your job is to dig holes.
The predominant motive that serial killers do what they do is a need for control. And so he's a very extreme example of a controlling serial killer in that, he's imprisoning his victims. He is keeping them after death. He was posing them in photographs. It's a very unusual age for a serial killer to begin his serial killing. The average age is around 28. So the mystery is how much of an average serial killer is he?
In 2018, Bruce was charged with the first-degree murder of all 8 men. In January 2019, Bruce pled guilty to all counts. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole until he's 91 years old. And even then, it is highly unlikely it will be granted.
Let's be honest here. I do not see Bruce McArthur seeing daylight. I do not see him in a public setting ever again. If he were to be paroled, then we'd have to start questioning our sentencing in the country. I'll take it for face value that in this case that life will mean life at the end of the day. He's eligible for parole in 25 years. That doesn't mean he's going to be free.
The police obviously came under a lot of fire during and after this for not following up on missing persons cases, allegations of racism, for handling things improperly at the time, which led Bruce to continue what he was doing. So, coming back to Toronto, as we do again and again, and I'm sure we will again, I think some conclusions we can derive from this is that maybe, just maybe, the Toronto Police Service, not very good, eh? The officer who investigated the 2016, choking incident with Bruce McArthur, where he was like, it's grand, don't worry about it. He was later charged with insubordination and neglect of duty and was found not guilty of both. So, there you go. There might not have even been much of a need for Project Houston or Project Prism if they had just done Project Do Your Job. A lot of shit came out. But that just about wraps up this one. Pretty horrific what he was doing there, preying. He's a predator. Complete definition of a predator, preying on people in the community I guess he wanted to join. Wanted to be a part of. Was a part of. And then like a wolf, he was just going around. Even creepier when you think you see him out there doing your garden, putting a head in your hedgerow or something. This case, as I said, was a major one. And I really did only scratch the surface of a lot of it, especially when you're talking about the numerous controversies that surrounded this case and the fallout it led to. The primary source for this video was The Missing and Missed by a judge who actually reviewed the case, the Honorable Gloria J. Epstein. Link in the sources below if you want to read more. It's a fascinating case study. But that just about wraps up this one. Big Bruce McArthur. Scary bastard. Alright, Toronto, you knocked it out of the park once again. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate you taking the time to be here with me. Here we go on. I'll see you as always real soon in the next old video. Until then, please take care of yourselves. I love you, Mike out.